So we just saw the Mishnah yesterday in Moed Katan on DAF Chav Ches Amud Beis, and it talks about women who are mekonenos, which means they are dirge singers or criers. This was to the tradition that they would be women who would cry out with...
we had it in Poland.
In Europe too, yeah? With poetic dirges to increase a sense of bitterness and crying to arouse mercy for the dead. So my Amran, so the Gemara's question is, what did these women used to say? Amar Rav, Vaila Azla, Vaila Chavila. Now here, for some reason, there's very little Rashi, so the Maharav Ranshberg on the margin sort of gives us his own Rashi interpretation. He says, woe to that which is leaving, meaning woe to the deceased who is leaving this world and will not return in the foreseeable future. Vaila Chavila, woe to the package, so to speak, this package that is on this casket or on this stretcher that is being taken out. Amar Rava, Nashe Deshichnitziv Amran Hachi Vaila Azla Vaila Chavila. Rava says this is precisely what the women of the town of Shichnitziv say. They say the same thing. Woe to he who is leaving permanently, and woe to this package. Va'amar Rava, and the Shei Deshichnitziv Amran, Rava says similarly. Apparently the women of Shichnitziv were like experts at this dirge art. They used to say, Good Garma Mikacha, Benamti Maya La Antichi. They used to say that the cheeks or the jowls have fallen, meaning that there's been a certain depression of the face as a result of this death, and the water has flowed upstream back to its source, referring to the soul going back to its life.
You're experts and you get paid for this.
Could be, I don't know. Va'amar Rav and the Shei Deshichnitziv Amran, Ato Fechasu Turei Debar Rami O Barav Revihu. They used to say when a hush of a person passed away, they would say, mountains, cover yourself up with darkness, because a very great man, a very exalted and great man is coming, has passed away. Va'amar Rav and the Shei Deshichnitziv Amran, Sheyul Itztala Demilsa Lebar Chorin Deshlimu Zavdei. They would say as follows, and they did this for poor people. And they would say for poor people, they would want to accentuate the fact that this person left the world completely destitute, so that people should cry more for the pathetic nature of this funeral. And they would say that this poor guy, for some people, death is preferable to life, because this person lived such a miserable life that he welcomed death. And the way that they would say it is that like Rashi over here explains, he says, Yafa Misa Kil Malbush Shel Miles, that death is a welcome like a fine silk garment for someone, Deshlimu Zavde, that all of his provisions were exhausted during his lifetime. Va'amar Rava Deshei Deshichnitziv Amran, Rohit v'nafil ama'abara v'yazuf Yasif. They would say about a person also who died destitute but had worked hard to make a living, they would say, look at this fellow. He ran to and fro all of his life, and yet at the end of the day he had to borrow money in order to cover his burial costs. So va'amar Rav and Shei Deshichnitziv Amran achana tagre azavzegi Mivtaku, that they used to say similarly that our brethren who are merchants in Abzagi, which seems to be some kind of place, Azabzagi, they would say, take heart, that sometimes spending your whole life spinning your wheels and running around going back and forth to do business, look at what it ends up with this guy. Look, he spent his whole life running the rat race and he never succeeded and had to die destitute.
It's interesting that they're quoting from the Noshim Deshichnitziv so much.
Yeah, that's why I say, apparently these women were known. They had a reputation for being so creative in the dirges that they sang. Va'amar Rav and the Shei Deshichnitziv Amran, Mosa Kimosa Umarin Chibula. So the Marav Ranshberg once again explains that even though this person died like all men in this world, he says, however, that Marin Chibulaya, his injuries were even worse than normal people, because this person suffered more than most other people during his life. Tanya Haya Rabbi Meir Omer, Tov Laleches El Beis Avel, that in Koheles, Rabbi Meir remarked, it says that it is better to go to the house of mourning, Mileches El Beis Mishta, than to go to a party. Kasher Husov Kol Adam, because death, of course, is the end of all men. Ve'achai Yitena Libo, and the living will plate this on their heart, meaning that they will take it to heart. So Dvarim Shalmisa, the Yaspad Yispedune, the Kaver Yikberune, the Yitan Yitanune, the Yodel Yidalune. So he explained as follows: what the pasuk is telling you is that when you go to the house of the mourner, meaning that you attend to the needs of the deceased, then you will be able to take back from your investment that which you had put into your investment. You'll be able to take back as a living person, so that when it's time for your death, people will take care of you. And therefore, if you eulogize others, others will eulogize you. If you bury others, others will bury you. If you carry their coffin, they will carry yours. And the yadel yidalune, and if you will raise your voice in eulogies and cries, others will raise their voice for you. Ve'ika da amre, others learn just the opposite. The lo yadel yidalune dichsiv, that others say that no, this pasuk is not telling you the reward for investing in the dead is that others will take care of you when you're dead, but rather that if you don't take care, you don't do the chesed of taking care of the dead, then others will cry for you when you die, meaning that your death will be more imminent. In other words, if you want to keep death away, take care of other dead people. Dichsiv ki tov amar leich Allah, because, and this is a pasuk, leich alecha alei, heina mehashpilcha lifnei nadiv asher ra'u einecha. It says in Mishlei that it says alei heina, arise up here, that in order to prevent yourself from being lowered because of the prince that you saw and did nothing. So if you want to prevent yourself from being lowered into the grave, then you should take care of other people who are dead. Okay. Tanu Rabbanan. Keshemesu banav shel Rabbi Yishmael nichnasu dalet zekenim lenachamo. Rabbi Tarfon v'Rabbi Yossi Haglili v'Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah v'Rabbi Akiva. So when Rabbi Yishmael suffered the tragic death of two of his sons in rapid succession, and when it came time for there to be Nichum Avelim, so the four giants, the four Gedalia Yisrael, came to offer Nichum Avelim. They were Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Yossi Haglili, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and Rabbi Akiva. Amar lahem Rabbi Tarfon, du'u shechacham gadolhu ubaki ba'agados, al yikanes echad michem letoch divrei chavero. So Rabbi Tarfon cautioned his colleagues. He says, listen, we're about to be Menachem Avel to Rabbi Yishmael. He is a huge Talmud Chacham. He knows all of the midrashim and all of the things that you're going to want to say. Make sure that you don't, so that's caution number one. In other words, measure your words carefully, because he'll be able to catch you if you misquote something or if you say something incorrect. And also, do not any of you interrupt your friend. Let your friend finish his thought, so that the words don't come across as garbled or confused. Amar Rabbi Akiva vani achron. So Rabbi Akiva says, okay, but I want to go last. So Pasach Rabbi Yishmael va'amar. Now, why did Rabbi Akiva want to go last? It's not clear from the story. Perhaps it's because Rabbi Akiva was doing this as a courtesy to his colleagues, to let them offer their words, and Rabbi Akiva would say, all right, whatever they don't say, I'll say. It could also be that he needed to collect his thoughts. It could be for a number of different reasons. Or Rabbi Akiva felt that he was the greatest of consolers of all of his colleagues, and therefore he wanted to offer his words of consolation last. So he basically, Pasach Rabbi Yishmael va'amar. So Rabbi Yishmael opened and said, when he sees the four colleagues who are great Gedalia Yisrael, he sees them come in and he says, Rabu avonosav tachvuhu avelav hitriach raboisav. He says, woe is me. My sins are great. My mourning has overtaken me, and I have also burdened my great teachers to come and have to be Menachem Avel twice. Pam Rishona Ushniya. So Nana Rabbi Tarfon va'amar. So Rabbi Tarfon goes first, and he says, Va'achechem kol beis Yisrael yivchu es hasreifa. Now, by the way, you notice that no one speaks until Rabbi Yishmael speaks. We'll learn about this. This is the halacha, that you have to wait until the mourner speaks. So Rabbi Tarfon responds to Rabbi Shmuel, and he says that when Nadav and Avihu died, Moshe tells them that you may not mourn, but rather your brethren, the whole house of Israel, shall cry over the two that have been burned tragically and died. V'halo dvarim kal v'chomer. So now make a kal v'chomer. Uma Nadav v'Avihu shelo asu ela mitzvah echas. Dichsiv vayakrivu b'nei Aaron es hadam elav. That Nadav and Avihu only really did one sacrificial mitzvah in their entire life, because shortly thereafter they were killed, right after the inauguration of the Mishkan. And yet, the Torah says that all of Israel cried for them. So kach banav shel Rabbi Yishmael alachas kama v'kama. So the two sons of Rabbi Yishmael, who did so much more for the Jewish people over a span of a much longer period of time, surely it's appropriate for the whole house of Israel to cry for them. Nana Rabbi Yossi Haglili ve'omer vayispedu lo kol Yisrael v'kavru oso. That it says about a certain king, which we'll learn about in just a minute, that the people all eulogized him and they buried him. Balo dvarim kal v'chomer uma Aviyab ben Yeravam. This king's name was Aviyab, the son of Yeravam. Now, shelo asa ela davar echad tov. He only did one really good thing in his life. Dichsiv be ya'an nimtza bo davar tov. So it says there's one good thing that is found in him, is what the Navi says. And yet, that, since he only did one thing, that was enough to deserve to be mourned and eulogized by the entire Jewish people. So kach banal shel Rabbi Yishmael alachas kama v'kama. So surely the sons of Rabbi Yishmael, who did many good things, surely they deserve to be properly mourned. My dover tov, what was the one good thing that he did? Reb Zera v'Reb Chinana bar Papa chad omer shabitel mishmarto v'ola l'regel v'chad omer shabitel pardeso shoshi v'Ravam aviv ala drachim shelo ya'ilu Yisrael l'regel. It's a very subtle debate. The debate is, we both know that we both agree that what Aviyah did is that in some way his father Yeravam had set up a barrier, a guard post, to prevent people from going from the northern part of Israel to make Aliyah l'regel to go to Yerushalayim. So the only dispute is, what did Aviyah do to disrupt it? Either he disrupted his own shift as a guard, and he slipped away and made Aliyah l'regel himself. And the other opinion is that he actually abolished the entire institution of these guard posts, and he allowed the Jewish people to make Aliyah l'regel. But the point is that was a really great thing, because he allowed people. The reason why Yeravam had prevented people from doing it is he wanted to preserve the autonomy of the northern part of Israel as its own independent state. And he said, no, it's more important for people to make Aliyah l'regel to the temple. Anyway, Nana Rabbi Elazar ben Azar. So that was the second rabbi. Then the third rabbi, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and he says, V'amar b'sholom tamus u'v'masreifos avosecha hamelachim harishonim asher yu lefanecha kein yisrafulach. Now this is a pasuk that the Navi is saying in reference to Tzidkiyahu HaMelech, one of the last kings of Israel, and he is prophesied that he will die in peace. And the very same funeral pyres that were ignited for his ancestors in their honor will be ignited for him as well. V'halo dvarim kal v'chomer. U'mat Tzidkiyahu melech Yehuda shelo asa ela mitzvah echas shehela Yirmiyahu min hatit. That it's a kal v'chomer. Tzidkiyahu really only did one good thing, is that for a certain period of time, Yirmiyahu HaNavi was forced into exile and was mired in mud. The Gemara says that it's a little bit more of an elaborate story in the Maseches Megillah. It talks about how Yirmiyahu brought back some of the tribes with him after he went into exile as well. But Tzidkiyahu was able to retrieve Yirmiyahu. So kach banav shel Rabbi Yishmael alachas kama v'kama. So if they mourned for him just because of that one good deed, then surely the sons of Rabbi Yishmael deserve to be mourned for as well. Nana Rabbi Akiva v'omer. So now it's Rabbi Akiva's turn. So what does he say? Vayom hahu yigdal hamispeid b'Yerushalayim kimispeid hadad rimon b'vikas Megiddo. So on that day, after the apocalyptic war, which is the pre-Messianic war, where there will be a lot of casualties, there will be a great eulogy in Jerusalem, like the eulogy of Hadad Rimon in Bikat Megiddo. Now, there was a king named Hadad Rimon, but he never waged a battle in Bikat Megiddo. So what do these two things have to do with each other? Va'amar Rav Yosef ilmole targume dahaikra lo haviyadana maika amar. Were it not for the Targum, the Aramaic translation of the pasuk, we would have no way of understanding what it means. But you have to really bifurcate the words and read it like this. Be'idna hahu yiski mispeda b'Yerushalayim kemispeda da'achav bar Omri de'katel yasei hadadrimon ben Tavrimon u'chemispeda Yeshaya bar Amon de'katel yasei paruchagir bebikas Megiddo. That it's really referring to two great kings who were felled by enemy forces. One was Achav, who was killed by Hadadrimon, and the other one is Yoshiyahu HaMelech, who was killed by Paro in a place called Bikat Megiddo, in a place called the Plain of Megiddo. Now, the fact of the matter is that Achav was not a great man. Achav was a wicked king, but he did one good thing in his death to really redeem himself, and that is, like we'll see in just a second, Valo Dvarim Kal V'chomer. Uma Achav Melech Yisrael Shelo Asa Ela Davar Echad Tov. King Achav only did one good thing in his life, towards the end of his life. D'chsiv V'hamelech Haya Ma'amad B'merkava Nochach Aram. That the king was standing in his chariot in the presence of Aram. Now, this is Hadadrimon, the king of Aram, is going out to war against Achav and his army. And Achav was told that he would not be successful by one of the Nevi'im, and he refused to believe in him. He listened instead to his own false prophets and went out to war. But early on in the battle, a stray arrow caught him, shot him, mortally wounded him, and yet he refused to be removed from the battlefield. He stood in his chariot as an example for the rest of his army for the entire day so that they would continue fighting, because he felt that if they take me off the battle as a wounded person, my whole army will lose heart and they'll flee. So we have to keep strong. He stood in his chariot the whole day, even though he was mortally wounded, and then that night he died. So that was his valorous act, which found him redemption right before his death. So he says, if that was the only thing that he did, and yet he deserves to be provided with all of these accolades, and even compared to Yoshiyahu HaMelech, the truly righteous king, so kach banav sheRabbi Yishmael alachas kama v'kama, so then surely the sons of Rabbi Yishmael will deserve to be mourned properly. Amarle Rava l'Rabba bar Mari, ksiv be b'tzidkiyahu b'shalom tamus, u'chasiv ves einei tzidkiyahu iver. I have a contradiction. One pasuk says that Tzidkiyahu, you will die in peace, and another pasuk says that Tzidkiyahu went through great tribulations and suffering before he died. He was blinded, after all, by King Nebuchadnezzar. So how can you tell me that he will die in peace if he didn't die in peace? So Amar lei hachi Amar Rabbi Yochanan shemes Nebuchadnezzar biyamav. The answer is that you're right. Sometimes dying in peace doesn't mean you'll be free from physical suffering. But dying in peace means he had peace of mind, knowing that his oppressor, King Nebuchadnezzar, died before him. That was his comfort. V'amar Rava l'Rabba bar Mari ksiv bei b'Yoshiyahu lachein hinini osifacha al avosecha v'ne'esafta el kavurosecha b'shalom. So one pasuk in regards to Yoshiyahu says that God says, I will let you die in peace and gather into your ancestors in peace. V'chasiv ayor hayom l'melech Yoshiyahu. And yet we know that Yoshiyahu died a particularly violent death on the battlefield, that he was shot through with arrows. Ba'amar of Yehuda Marav Sha'asu Kikavara. And we know that they made his body so full of arrow holes that he was like a sieve by the time he died. Talked about this in one of our Pirkei Avos sessions. But the question is, how can you tell me that he'll die in peace when that's not called a peaceful death. Peaceful death is you're surrounded by your grandchildren and you just, and then that's it, right? This was not a peaceful death. This was the least peaceful of deaths. So Amar Lehachi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Shalocharev Beis Hamikdash B'Yamav. The answer is he had peace of mind not to have to witness the destruction of the temple in his lifetime. That was the peace that was given to him. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Ein Menachem in Rishayim Lomer Davar Ad Sheyiftach Avel. As we saw before by the story of Rabbi Yishmael, the people who come to console the mourner may not begin speaking until the mourner himself speaks. You're probably familiar with this halacha. And Shenamar Acharechein Pasach Iyov Espihu Bahadar Vayana Lifazatimani. We learn this from the book of Job, that it was only after Job, who was the mourner, opened up his mouth to speak, did his friend Eliphaz respond. Amar Abavahu minayin la'avel shemesav barosh. How do we know that an avel, when he's surrounded by other people and they're dining together, that he should sit at the head of the table? Now, really, the avel you would think should sit at the end of the table, but perhaps this is a way of consoling him to say that we want you to sit at the head because life will continue for you, and there will be a future for you. So, how do you know that this is the proper protocol? Shenamar. So this is a pasuk in Iyov. It says, Evchar darkam, ve'eshev rosh, ve'eshkon kemelech bagadud kasher avelim yinachem. That the pasuk equates a king to a mourner. So, and therefore, just like a king sits at the head, as it says, ve'eshev rosh, that I will sit at the head, so too does the mourner sit at the head. So the Gemara says, but wait a minute, if you look at the pasuk properly, it says, Avelim yinachem achrini mashma. It sounds like we're talking about he who consoles the mourner, not the mourner himself. So if anything, the consolers should sit at the head, and the avel should sit at the other end, is what the pasuk implies. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, yinachem ksiv. Because since you could also read the word yinachem, that he shall console as he shall be consoled, therefore it is a reference to the mourner, and therefore the mourner should sit at the head. Mar Zutra Amar Mehacha. Mar Zutra says you learn out this principle from a different pasuk. This is a pasuk in Amos. Lachein ata yiglu berosh golim. Now they shall be exiled at the head of exiles. The sor mirzach seruchim. The sor over here we're reading it as like with a sin, as a head, a prince. Mirzach seruchim, which means that he shall be that naaseh mirzach naaseh sar lisruchim. The word mirzach is a contraction of two words, mar and zach. Mar means bitter, and zach, I'm not sure exactly how to translate, but it sounds to be like distracted or displaced. Disturbed. Okay? So naaseh sar lasruchim, he who is in that state of bitterness and mourning shall become an officer for those who are lowly. Amar Rabbi Chama bar Chanina minayin lechasen shemesev barosh. Now let's go to the other end. How do you know that a chasen should sit at the head of the table? You give honor to a newlywed groom. So shenamar kechasen yechahen pe'er. As the pasuk in Yeshaya says, that God will rejoice over the Jewish people. Kechasen, like a bridegroom, yechahen pe'er, shall minister over beauty. So the word kohen is associated with the word chasen. Ma kohen barosh, av chasen barosh. Just like a kohen sits at the head, or is it gets the first place, so too a chasen. The kohen gufim inolan. And how do you know that a kohen sits at the head? The Tana devei Rabbi Yishmael v'kidashto. As we know, the famous pasuk, "You shall sanctify the kohen l'chol davar shebikdusha." This tells me that when any area of a communal sanctification, the kohen goes first. Liftoach rishon, ulevarich rishon, v'litomanu yafer rishon. This tells me that he gets the first aliyah for kriyas haTorah. He leads the zimun first, and he also is able to take the first portion of food at a sudas mitzvah. Amar Rabbi Chanina, kasha yitzias neshama min haguf, kitzipori b'fi haveshet. That separating the soul from the body at the time of death is not an easy matter, because it's very difficult for the soul to depart from the body, just like pulling out a knotted rope from the loop that's on the deck of the ship. It's just like they would make knots in the rope in order to be able to make sure that it doesn't get pulled out of the hole in the loop, in the metal loop that's on the ship deck. And to try and pull that rope out, it takes a huge amount of strength, and that's the difficulty of pulling a soul from a body. Rabbi Yochanan Amar kipeture b'fi veshet. And the way it seems that Rashi learns the difference between these two is that here it's when you moor or connect two boats together, you have to put one rope with a knot at either end so that the boats stay tethered together. It says pulling them apart with this knotted rope, that's a very difficult task. And that's what it's like to separate body from soul. Why two boats versus one boat? Because perhaps the two boats are being compared to the body, one boat for the body, one boat for the soul. Va'amar Rabbi Levi bar Chita haniftar min hameis lo yomer lo lech lishalom ela lech bishalom, and haniftar min hachai lo yomer lo lech bishalom ela lech lishalom. Now, this is a principle that when you depart from a dead person, when you leave the body at the time of burial, you say lech bishalom, go in peace, and when you depart from a living person, you say lech lishalom, go towards peace. Now, what's the difference between the two? One is lech bishalom, go in peace. It implies a static state, a steady state from now. I'm not going to see you again, but I assume that you'll be in a state of constant peace, because once you die, there's no opportunity for change. Lech lishalom means go towards peace, which means that as a productive human being, you will constantly be progressing and advancing in your life towards an ultimate goal. That's the difference between the dead and the living. The living always have something to work towards and continue their efforts, and the dead are in a steady state because there's nothing more for them to accomplish.
So when you're in a cemetery, you would say lech b'shalom.
Lech b'shalom.
When you leave your
right.
deceased relative.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you say goodbye to someone, you say tzeichem l'shalom or lech l'shalom.
Mm-hmm. Is it done? Do people actually?
Yeah, sure.
It's a proper thing to say.
Yeah. Haniftar min hameis lo yomer lo lech l'shalom ela lech b'shalom shenemar ve'ata tovo el avosecha b'shalom. That when Hashem speaks to Avram at the bris bein habisarim, He tells him, even though your children will be slaves for 400 years, you will come to your ancestors, meaning you will die bishalom, in a state of peace. And menachai lo yomer lo lech bishalom ela lech lishalom shrei David shamar l'Avshalom lech bishalom halach v'nisla Yisra shamar l'Moshe lech lishalom halach v'itzliach. And how do you know that to a living person it's not good to say lech bishalom, but rather lech lishalom? Because when David said to his son Avshalom lech bishalom, Avshalom met with a very grisly demise. And when Yisro told his son-in-law Moshe lech lishalom, Moshe was very successful from that point onwards. Ba'amar Rabbi Levi kol hayotz mi beis hakneses lebeis hamedrash u'mebeis hamedrash lebeis hakneses zocha u'mekabel pnei shechina. In a related issue, as far as a person who always has to be advancing in life, that if a person is constantly leaving shul to go to the beis medrash, and then leaving the beis medrash to go to shul, like so many people do, they spend their day constantly advancing and going from prayer to learning, from learning to prayer. In other words, always making sure that your time is occupied with something productive. So those people, about those people, it says they will receive the divine presence. Shenamar yelchu michayil el chayil yira'el elokim b'tzion. They will go from strength to strength, and they will be seen before God in Zion. That's to receive the divine presence. Amar Reb Chia bar Ashi, Amar Rab, Talmidei Chachamim ein lehem menucha afilu la'olam haba. But even though we said that the dead do not advance, that's for your regular person. But Talmidei Chachamim have no rest even in the world to come. They are constantly advancing. Shenamar yelchu michayil el chayil yeira'eh el elokim b'tzion, because he learns the pasuk as a reference to olam haba. The tzaddikim will continue to go from strength to strength, and while appearing before God in olam haba in the future world. Hadron ulach ve'elu megalchin uslicha lamaseches Moed. Let's just do the mission in Chagiga, and with that we will finish.
So we continue to learn Torah in olam haba.
Yes.
Yeah. So you should say that.
I mean, provided that you learned in this life, right? You know, if you didn't learn in this life Torah, then they'll put you back to first grade in Olam Haba.
Is the art scroll library provided to us?
That's a good question. I'm sure there will be some people that will have an art scroll library, you know, and
so Lech B'Shalom wouldn't apply to them. They're still going.
That's right. That seems to be what the Gemara is implying, right? But you know, if we're to understand the distinction between bit and lit correctly. Well, you know, the Gemara talks about chavrusas, you know, up in Shamayim. It talks about the Mesifta Durakia, the heavenly yeshiva. So, Amir Hashem, you know, well, hopefully we'll have a nice chevra up there.
I'm not planning on going anywhere.
They'll serve Starbucks. Okay. Okay. Hakol chayavin b're'iyah chutz mecheres shoyte v'katan v'tumtum v'androginus. The Mishnah over here is telling us that there's a mitzvah called Re'iyah. There's actually an interesting machlokas here between Rashi and Tosfos as far as what the word Re'iyah means. Because we know that Re'iyah means, we're starting Chagiga now, first Mishnah Chagiga. Re'iyah means to appear or to be seen. But there are two translations of that. Rashi learns the simple understanding, which is that 3 times a year, Hashem says, you shall be seen in my temple. So I want you to make an aliyah l'regel. I want you to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem and come to the Beis HaMikdash 3 times a year. That's what Re'iyah means. But Tosfos says Re'iyah refers specifically to the Olas Re'iyah, to a burnt offering that you're supposed to bring every Shalosh Regalim. Every Shalosh Regalim, the individual, presumably together with his family, is supposed to bring 2 animals at a minimum, in addition to any other sacrifices that he has to bring. One is called the Olas Re'iyah, which is a burnt offering, completely burnt to Hashem. And the other one is the Shalmei Chagiga, or just Chagiga, which is an animal that you end up eating the majority of the meat of the animal yourself, but the entrails are offered on the Mizbeach as an offering to Hashem. So we're going to learn about the Shalmei Chagiga and the Olas Re'iyah. But remember, the word Ola means completely burnt. The word Shlama means that it's eaten primarily by the bringer. And one is called Olas Re'iyah, and the other one is called Shalmei Chagiga. So Tosfos says that the word Re'iyah over here refers to everyone being obligated to bring this burnt offering. And the exceptions, but we'll learn like Rashi for now, that it means for making a pilgrimage, everyone's obligated to do so, except for people who are not of sound mind, meaning a cherish, a deaf mute, a shaita, a person who's mentally ill, and a katan and a minor. Betumtum vandroginus, also a person who's exempt is someone who is not 100% male in their gender. So therefore tumtum and androginus, either ambiguous or hermaphroditic. V'nashim va'avadim she'enu mishuchrarim, and women certainly are exempt, and unfreed slaves are exempt because they're not full-fledged Jews. Hachiger v'hasuma v'hachoyla v'hazakein, a person who's handicapped, has difficulty walking, a blind person, a sickly person because he physically has difficulty, and a zakein, and an elderly person. U'mi she'enu yachol lalos b'raglav, or a person who's not physically able to walk. Now, if we just said that if you're handicapped, you don't go, so what is this line in the Mishnah coming to include? The Gemara will discuss this. Ezehu katan. So now, even though the Mishnah has told us previously that a katan is exempt from aliyah l'regel, that's only midiraisa. But midirabanan, you're supposed to take your children with you to aliyah l'regel, but only after a certain age. And that's really what our Mishnah is telling us. At what age are you obligated rabbinically to take your children with you? So we have a machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Kol she'enu yachol lirkov al kasefav shel aviv v'la'alos mirushalayim lahar habayis divrei Beis Shammai. So Beis Shammai say that it's any child as long as the child can ride on your shoulders. So from the age of being a toddler and up, an infant obviously you're not going to put on your shoulders, but from the age that he can ride on your shoulders, then you have to take the child with you, your son with you. But Beis Hillel disagree. Beis Hillel omrim kol she'enu yachol lechos biyado shel aviv v'lalos mirushalayim lahar habayis. Beis Hillel say no. The child has to be old enough to be taken by the hand and to walk independently, because shenemar shalosh regalim, because the pasuk says 3 legs or 3 pilgrimages, which means that you have to be able to walk. And therefore, even rabbinically, the rabbis did not require you to take a child who can't walk yet. So if the child can walk from Yerushalayim to the Temple Mount, so then you have to take him with you. But if he's younger than that, maybe 3-4 years old, so then you leave him at home. Beis Shammai omrim hari'iyah shtei kesef v'hachagiga ma'a kesef, u'Beis Hillel omrim hari'iyah ma'a kesef v'hachagiga shtei kesef. And then we have a final machlokas in our Mishnah, which is how much must you spend for the Olas Re'iyah and the Shalmei Chagiga, respectively. So Beis Shammai are of the opinion that you should spend more for the Olas Re'iyah, twice as much for the Olas Re'iyah than the Shalmei Chagiga. Because after all, it's a burnt offering. It's going completely to Hashem. So spend double for the Ola that you do on the Shlomim. And Beis Hillel say just the opposite. You spend 100 or 10 for the Ola, and double that, 20 or 200 for the Shlomim. And the Gemara will explain to us the basis of this machlokes, but that at least lets us conclude the very first Mishnah in Maseches Chagiga. We'll continue with Hashem tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.